2025 ends in less than 60 days. And for tech jobs, things are looking pretty rough. For the past few months, companies have had made big cuts, tens of thousands of layoffs. So the market is tighter, competition is sharper, and learning alone is not enough anymore. So if you're still looking to land your first role, you are a bit behind. Not because you haven't studied enough, but because you have finished courses, tutorials, and certifications and still have nothing real to show. That's the gap we are closing today. Remember, your goal is not to know every cloud service or memorize every concept. You just have to be job ready. And by job ready, I mean having some real hands-on project, a strong resume or portfolio, and the confidence to finally apply for those cloud and DevOps roles. And that's exactly what this video will help you do. Hi, I'm Vishakha. Today, I'll be sharing a 60-day roadmap that will help you land a cloud role in 2026. So in this video, I'll walk you through the common technologies you should know, how to practice them, what are the common beginner mistakes you can make, some weekly tasks, and if you stay till the end, I'll share a quick bonus tip that will help you fast track your learning and visibility before you enter into 2026. Let's get started. If you're a beginner, pause here before jumping into week 1. So you'll get way out of this roadmap if you make this mini foundations using these 5 things. Number 1 is to conceptually understand SDLC. How is idea converted into code and then it's deployed in production? So software delivery lifecycle is something you need to know. Number 2 is Linux. You need to know how to navigate the terminal. There are few free interactive labs from Code Cloud and the Bandit game that you should try. 5 hours with Linux can really help you, trust me. Third, you also need to have some hands-on practice with Git and GitHub. I will share some GitHub branching links which just will help you practice the commands and understand the concepts. Fourth is basic networking. There is cloud networking, but you need to know the basic networking like IP, DNS, ports, systems, just to understand how the systems communicate with each other. And if you know, I'm hinting towards OSI model. Number 5th, the cloud mindset. What are the different service models like IaaS, PKaaS, SaaS, basically infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service. You need to know that. You need to understand the difference as well as the different deployment models. This is just a brief. I will share a full GitHub repo with all the right information you need to follow before you head into week 1. Now, let's dive into week 1. This is where you will build the cloud foundations. The goal here is to understand what cloud really means. So concepts like virtualization, where you are hosting many computers in one physical block. Second, you need to dive into regions and zones. These are basically data centers located in different cities and it helps with redundancy. So the recent AWS outage that happened in US East 1, so you need to design systems keeping redundancy in mind. Then you need to understand the compute, storage, network blocks, the basic CPU and RAM, where the data lives and how it travels. Then there's another thing like identity access management. This is the core security pillar. Who gets access to what? There are a bunch of free learning paths and I will strongly suggest you to spend 5 to 6 hours in going through those paths. And this is not something offered by external entities, it's by the cloud providers. I will be sharing the links in my repo for your reference. These free learning paths are AWS Cloud Practitioner, Azure Fundamentals, and GCP Digital Leader. As a hands-on practice, create a free tier account if you haven't already. If you're taking AWS, there are a bunch of tutorials, just easy to follow. Follow it. Deploy a static website and look around the cost dashboard as well. Once you can point to a running page that you have deployed on cloud, it passes through a big mental barrier. Trust me, that one page really makes you very proud of yourself. Now, what will not work? Jumping right into certifications or YouTube tutorials without touching the console. Reading just definitions and concept through documents won't make it click. But seeing a region, deploying a bucket will. Now, we head into week 2. This is the Linux and networking for cloud, not just the basic Linux or networking skills that I mentioned for. This is cloud-based. So the goal for this week is to get into the server and see how it works. You need to understand about the virtual machines. Every cloud provider offers this service called Compute. It's basically a rented Linux, Ubuntu, or a Windows box. Then there's something called AMI in Amazon language, but it's basically the operating system template you use to provision a VM. Then you have the VPC. It's the core networking component, which is the private corner of the cloud. Everything is deployed in VPC. So you need to know how it's created and like how to set the IP range and what are the best isolation practices. Then we get into subnets. These are basically the isolated units within a VPC. Then you have the security groups, network access control list. Every cloud provider have something similar. You need to just translate. So if you're coming from one cloud provider, you should be able to map it to another one. Again, the learning paths help here. Invest 6 to 7 hours there. Now the action item for week 2 is to launch a VM. I'll take an example of AWS because it has the most active community and a lot of tutorials. The first step is to launch an EC2 instance using using AMI, which is the Amazon Machine Image. It's an OS template. You have to select a VPC, a subnet, set some security groups in the console itself. You will see all those fields. You can place it in a public subnet so you can connect to that server. Open port 22 for SSH and port 80 for web. Once you have launched that instance, SSH into it, install Nginx. It's a proxy server. Add this file index.html, which is basically the page that will pop up when you hit the IP address. Also, just verify you have a public IP address. Once it's live, just hit the public IP and you will see whatever is in the index.html file. A bonus tip here is to check the logs. I'm telling you, you will learn a lot through those logs. Just remember the user interface, if you're like doing through the console, it's nice and fine to set up, but learn the terminal. That's where the real work happens. Now, what will not work? If you sign up for predefined labs or certain tutorials, which are just like, copy pasting things, you will not learn anything throughout it. That backtracking to see which port is not open will teach you more. So don't rely on predefined labs. Also, don't avoid troubleshooting. It is the best thing to happen to you, trust me. Now, week 3, we are jumping into infrastructure as code. The goal here is to stop clicking and start declaring in a file. In my previous video, I've given you a brief around Terraform. It's the infrastructure as code tool that helps you define your whole infrastructure in a template. So basically for Terraform, you define a desired state and Terraform builds it for you. So in the template, you need to add a provider. That's basically the cloud plugin. There's a state file. That's basically the Terraform's memory. And there are advanced concepts like modules, which are reusable templates that you can use to define that infrastructure. Now, things to do for this particular week is to be familiar with Terraform, like the commands like init, plan, apply, destroy. Then write a small main.tf file, create a VPC, assign a subnet, create an EC2 instance. Whatever you did in week 2 by clicking, you need to define it in the template. Also deploy an S3 bucket. When you run Terraform init, it shows you what will happen once you apply the configurations. So once you verify that, apply it and see everything coming live without you touching the console. The outcome of using Terraform is that you can recreate infrastructure without wasting a lot of hours. So for instance, this is also a design concept, right? Like when anything fails in one region, how can you recreate the whole infrastructure in another region? Again, you cannot keep running 2 active zones here. It's just like a disaster recovery situation, right? Terraform comes as a savior then. You just apply the same configuration files that you have in region 1 and boom, you have the entire infrastructure ready to serve. So Terraform is the most in-demand skill right now. Now, what will not work in week 3 with Terraform? Don't just copy paste the configurations. Just write something from scratch first. Yes, in the future, you will be copy pasting a lot of things, but now since you are learning, you need to understand the whole syntax first. Also, be patient with indentation. Also, read a little bit around provider, because if you keep deploying like instances, VPC, subnets, and not know how to deploy or what you are deploying, what configurations are set, then it may create problems later. Now, let's enter week 4. This is around containers and Kubernetes. The goal of this platform is to package once, run anywhere. You've heard this a bunch of times. Since you're new, you need to understand what is a Docker image. It's basically your app with dependencies packaged in a file. Container is one of that instance from that file. Remember, we talked about AMI and VM. Think of it in the same way. You have Docker image and then you have a container. You will be writing a lot of Docker files here. And then we have our amazing Kubernetes. It's that manager that keeps the containers alive. So in this week, you will understand Docker, the components, how to write a Docker file, how to create containers using a Docker file. So basically be familiar with the Docker CLI. The next step is to get into Kubernetes. Yes, we are skipping other orchestration platforms because you need to be ready before 2026. So let's just jump right into Kubernetes. You need to understand pods, deployments, services, namespaces, all the famous objects that you might have heard a million times. So by the end of this week, you need to do these 3 things. Dockerize a small Flask or Node.js app, then go read a bit about the cloud managed Kubernetes. For instance, AWS has EKS, that's the managed Kubernetes platform. GCP has GKE, again a managed platform. And then Azure has AKS. So go read around it. Try to see if you can create a cluster, create a node within that cluster, and use the terminal to run some kubectl commands, whichever you prefer. Common beginner mistakes here is jumping right into Kubernetes without understanding why it's used, and then watching bunch of tutorials where you don't really understand how everything is tied together. So in tutorials, you will see a lot of YAML files and you just maybe write the same thing to the YouTube video or copy paste the configs. But unless you understand how that pod manifest is written, what are the different sections in it, why is it like, how do you specify a port and all those things, you are missing out on the bigger picture. Now we enter into week 5. This is the CI/CD pipelines, which is continuous integration and continuous delivery. You're basically automating everything from build to deploy. Remember during the foundations, I asked you to understand SDLC. This is where it's used. So every code or every application that you write, which has code in it, needs to go through certain stages in order to be accessible by the users. These stages are called code, build, test, deploy. This is where CI/CD pipeline comes into picture. You might have heard about tools like Jenkins, Travis, cloud managed tools, cloud managed services like Cloud Build, Code Pipelines. These services helps you do that. So what you can do here in this week, pick one tool, GitHub Actions or Jenkins. The reason I'm asking you to pick up GitHub Actions or Jenkins and not a cloud managed service is because first, they are open source, so you can build projects cloud agnostic, and second, they have a lot of projects as well. So do a project here. For instance, in this pipeline, every time a code is pushed, it triggers a build to create a Docker image, and then you run some tests, and once all those tests passes, you move it to a registry. Once the image is ready in a container registry, you can now deploy it to an EC2 instance or a Kubernetes cluster. Keep it simple first. One repo, one pipeline, one backend target. That backend target could be EC2 or Kubernetes. I keep saying EC2 because I'm taking AWS as like a platform right now. I will share more details around these projects, so you don't have to write anything right now. Now, common beginner mistakes, copy pasting the YAML without knowing what each step does or what each stage does, or worse, trying to learn Jenkins, GitHub Actions, GitLab all at once. Trust me, you'll be overwhelmed. So make sure one tool, one pipeline, done right. Now week 6, we are in cloud security. The goal is to protect your setup by design. So go through services like IAM, which is the identity access management. Before that, understand how authentication and authorization works. Authentication is basically knowing who you are, and authorization is basically what permissions you have. Go through the documentation of least privilege just to understand what it means, and then go through services like KMS, Secret Manager, audit logs to see who did what. So a couple of things you can do to test your knowledge around security. Create a non-admin user in your console because you are the admin, so create a non-admin user first and give some limited S3 permissions. Now when you sign in as that user, just go and check what all permissions you have. So basically, as an admin, you will have all access to that S3 bucket, but when you sign in as that particular user, you will only have limited permissions. And limited permissions may be like you will be able to read the file but not be able to download it. Few other key tasks that you can try, and I'll share it in detail through my repo. Week 7, we are into monitoring and AI ops. The goal of this week is to see problems before users do. Get familiar with terms like metrics, logs, alerts, and traces. Metrics are basically numbers, logs are events, alerts are signals, and traces basically tells you the journey of a request. Now in this week, you will learn about Prometheus and Grafana. It gives an amazing observability platform, and a lot of enterprises are installing it. So tool wise, I will insist that you focus on Prometheus and Grafana. There's an amazing project that you should build, and I will also share more details around it. But let's move on. And common beginner mistakes for this week is you dive too much into Prometheus, Grafana, or like cloud logging tools without understanding how it will be used. So my 2 cents here would be to first understand the use case here, why you are using this, and how to integrate it within your current setup. Like for instance, how will you integrate Prometheus into your current Kubernetes cluster? Week 8 is all about building that final project and a strong portfolio. As you're coming closer to week 8, you might have seen that I've reduced the amount of work that you need to do, but strongly building confidence in what you have. In this week, you're wrapping up around all the things you have done in the last 7 weeks. So you're going back and looking at those tools, checking how familiar you have become after reading docs or applying things, or even feeling through things. And since you still have 7 days, so every day you will build some project. And now depending on how you were able to grasp the concepts, maybe one project will take you 2 to 3 days. Just do it. I will share the detailed projects again through my repo, but like this is just a high level overview of what you need to do around week 8. Now for week 8, what are the things you should definitely avoid? First, don't build random disconnected projects. We have gone through the whole curriculum. Every week you have learned around like some cloud foundations, you have learned about IAC tool like Terraform, then you have entered into CI/CD pipeline, containerization, creating a cluster, and then getting into observability. So you have to map all those things in bunch of projects. So for one project, you will be focusing on containerizing an app. For another, you will be automating the deployment using CI/CD pipelines. Another one is like provisioning an entire infrastructure through IAC like Terraform. And observability is like everything together, along with AI Ops. With AI Ops, you just need to have like a high level understanding, so you don't need to dive into it right now. And that's your complete roadmap to become a cloud engineer before 2025 ends. So for the next 8 weeks, all you need is consistency. Set a deadline. This is not the exact roadmap that you may follow. You will create your own roadmap once you start practicing through things, but I hope this gives you a bit of structure. I've also prepared a sheet for you to track your daily progress and detailed skill set. So to wrap up, make sure you document everything. Also, tag me in your stories with hashtag 60 days to cloud if you're following this. And if you find this video useful, make sure you share it with your friends as well. And don't forget to subscribe before you go. I'll see you in the next video.